How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Deku Had Sunshine, the movie. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and now, let's begin. We start this what if off with a mysterious figure standing in a field of grass. All of a sudden, a strange portal opens up beneath them as they then fall through the portal. What the hell's going on, they would say. All of a sudden, they appear in another field of grass. However, once they look over the tree line, they see massive skyscrapers and buildings and are confused. What are those? They don't look like the castles of his day. As this person would then continue on walking, as you would end up seeing another person walking. This would be a very beautiful green-haired lady. You would end up walking towards her and asking what her name was, as she would end up saying Inko. All of a sudden, he would ask her what year was it, and she would then reply to him. He was completely in shock. It was nowhere close to the year that he had just been in. Everything looked completely different. He would ask her about how everything changed, where were the castles and everything, but she was just left speechless. Now, a couple years would end up passing, as those two are now happily married. This mysterious figure happened to be Escanor from the anime 7 Deadly Sins. And they end up having a child, as Izuku would end up being born, the son of Inko and Escanor. As Izuku would end up aging, he would end up being told he doesn't have a quirk, and this is simply because Inko, having had a quirk, it's only a 50% chance of Izuku having a quirk, with Escanor not having the genes of possessing such an ability. However, with Escanor as Izuku's father, Izuku has the possibility to use magic. And this is what Escanor would end up training him on, not wanting his son to be weak, knowing what the world did to quirkless people, having seen it himself, walking around seeing all the people that have been just outcasted because of him being labeled as quirkless. Lucky for Escanor, he had been able to bring his sacred treasure, being Rita, over to this world. Somehow it had fallen through the portal with him as well. So with Escanor's new family started, he would start to train Izuku after being told he was quirkless, training him every single day so that Izuku wouldn't be a weak little quirkless person like everyone else. He wanted Izuku to be strong and tough. That is what he wanted of Izuku, something that Izuku could use to better himself and possibly even become his dream of being a hero, as Escanor had been a hero back in the other world, and so he wanted Izuku to be a hero in this world, much like he had dreamed of. So Escanor would train Izuku every day, and even would try to get Izuku to lift his sacred treasure, which of course wouldn't work at all, with it basically being insanely heavy, and a small 4-year-old wasn't quite able to lift it at all. After years of training, Izuku would finally turn 12, and Escanor would finally decide to pass on his ability, being Sunshine, down to Izuku, deeming that he has really no use for it anymore. So he just decided to pass it down to Izuku, his son. So Izuku now has a crazy cool new power called Sunshine, as Escanor would end up teaching Izuku the ropes of it, as Izuku would end up growing in power as the day would end up going on, like I explained in the start of this video. So with Izuku's power level growing and growing and growing as the day went on, he would end up being insanely strong at noon, while not so strong at night, say 9 p.m. So Izuku, walking into school one day, would sit down, relaxing, knowing that it was the final day of school and he could finally get out of all the torment of the bullying. He just decided not to care about it. It really wasn't him supposing to just beat up everyone. That's just not the kind of person he was. His parents taught him what was right and wrong. They instilled it in his mind what he should be doing, and fighting back to bullying just wasn't the thing. Sure, if they started to beat him up or something, he could fight back to protect himself, but if it was just based on revenge, that is not the case. Revenge is a deadly thing, and you should not be going out for revenge. It could cause you to make fatal mistakes. For example, Ida with Stain, how he almost got killed because he wanted revenge for his brother. However, Izuku had no clue about this because it never even happened yet in this timeline. So Izuku would be sitting in class as paper airplanes would fly overhead as the teacher would end up walking in with a stack of papers. Slamming them down on his desk, he would end up standing up. "Attention class, quiet down, quiet down. Well, it appears you all have finally submitted all of your high school forms. Now let me see. Oh, it appears Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya have signed up to take the UA entrance exams. I wish both of you good luck." The entire class would just burst into laughter. "Izuku? Him? Making UA? You gotta be kidding me! What a joke!" Many of the class would end up laughing and laughing, as Bakugo, however, wouldn't be laughing with the class. He would walk up to Izuku, his eyes hidden, slamming his hand down on his desk, as sparks would fly out of his hand, burning into Izuku's desk. "You better stay away, Deku. Only I'm good enough to get into UA. All of these other kids are just simple rejects. They'd be lucky to even get a sidekick job. And you, a quirkless kid, thinking you could even make it into UA? You gotta be kidding me. You're a joke, Izuku." As Izuku would just stare in shock at Bakugo's words, but wouldn't really mind it. "Okay, Bakugo, sure. Yeah, I'm quirkless, but that doesn't mean I'm powerless after all. Plus, UA doesn't only accept hero students, there's also general classes, so why don't you step down from your high horse before you get jumped off of it by me? So I'm clearly right on your heels, about to push you off of your throne, Bakugo. You better watch yourself." As Bakugo would be in shock, along with the entire class. This was basically the first time Izuku had protected himself instead of just disregarding all of their thoughts and opinions about him, as the entire class just wasn't sure what to say. This was the first time someone had even defended themselves against Bakugo. As Bakugo would be sitting fuming, standing there right next to Izuku, the teacher would see Bakugo and stop him before he could do anything that could possibly harm his reputation, not wanting Bakugo to not make UA because of his super powerful quirk and having a reputation of beating up kids. So he would tell Bakugo to take a seat, which he would angrily do so. As the day would end up passing, Izuku walked back home, happy about what he did. It was the first time he had defended himself, and it felt good. Izuku had always wanted to do this, knowing that he could possibly beat Bakugo in a fight. He just wanted to honor his parents' word, and that is something that was instilled in his mind, to honor their wishes, and so he just didn't bother do it. As 10 months would end up passing of long, grueling training, Izuku would finally have the time to take the UA entrance exam, as it was the start of it. The first day was just based on the written exam, as it was long hours, around 7 hours of exams for every single subject, like math, history, science, English, all of these subjects having to be taken in a singular day. And once they were done, Izuku would go out of there completely drained of all energy. It was so boring, question after question, having to read and do problems for 7 hours straight. Izuku just decided to go back home and take some rest, and hopefully get some of his energy back and enthusiasm about this UA test for the hero exam that would be set for the stage tomorrow morning. So when Izuku would wake up, he would rush to UA, excited, and he would finally be taking the UA entrance exam, and he was finally going to make it. Izuku would rush in, however he would bump into someone not paying attention, looking up at the massive UA building once again. As this person in front of him would end up falling down, Izuku would jump back, saying that he was so sorry for this before putting out his hand out. There he would see the face of a young brown-haired girl, as she would then say, "Oh, my bad, I was kind of just standing still. You're the second person to bump into me. I just kind of got stuck in the road, lost in how marvelous this building is. I could see it yesterday, but now it's even more beautiful. I really hope I can see this every single day." As Izuku would say, "Yeah, me too. Hey, my name's Izuku Midoriya. What's yours?" "Oh, it's Ochaku Uraraka." As she would then grab Izuku's hand before he would help her lift up, as Izuku would then rush back off into the auditorium, as the person behind him, Uraraka, would then do the same. As Izuku would sit down, he would see a yellow-haired blonde person step up onto the auditorium. He had never seen this person before, as one of the people he would end up overhearing was saying, "Oh, that's the hero present Mike. I saw him yesterday. He must be the teacher for this kind of thing." As Izuku would just think, "Oh, so I guess that hero's present Mike, I guess?" Still don't understand who that could be. As Izuku would end up hearing Present Mike explain the UA entrance exam. How there is just robots that you have to defeat. A 1, 2, 3-pointer and a massive 0-pointer that you should probably just ignore. And you're going to have 3 hours to not go unconscious and to defeat as much robots as possible. But I must warn you all, these robots are made of the hardest material that we could get our hands on. And so breaking them is a severe challenge. The principal here has calculated to take you just around 10 minutes to destroy one 1-pointer. So I suggest you all work together to defeat points. Plus, we're looking for teamwork. Also, that could also net you a couple points, as Izuku would end up nodding about all this information before walking off. Every person in that auditorium was given a paper slip that had a letter on it, either from A, B, or C. As Izuku would be given a paper slip with the letter A on it, he would walk to City Site A, where he would end up being seen in a hallway, where he would then spot the brown-haired girl again, walking up to wish her good luck. However, he was stopped by a blue-haired person. "Hey, you probably shouldn't distract her. She's probably just really focused or something." As Izuku would disregard that, however, he would see the doors had rushed open. He would immediately jump out right past everyone else, jumping to destroy robots, as he would then grab on the back of his back. There would be his sacred treasure now, being Rita. He had told the teachers there that Rita was a part of his quirk, as he basically had to lie to everyone that he had a quirk and not some mysterious power, as he would kind of be suspicious if someone just showed up with a power that they said wasn't a quirk. So Izuku would just say his axe was a part of his quirk, and so he would get off by using it. So Izuku, now wielding his axe in one hand, he would end up seeing the beating sun above him, knowing that he was already going to be quite powerful. However, he wasn't nearly as powerful. It was just around a quarter till or 15 minutes until 12 p.m., knowing that the hero assignment or whatever, the exams were going to be an hour or 3 hours long. He knew he was going to destroy tons of robots. As Izuku would see a run pointer chasing right at him, he would slice its head clean off, causing the teachers in the watching room to jump right out of their seats. "What? Did you just see that? That kid's quirk just sliced right through the robot. We've seen others with sword quirks and things like that, but they couldn't barely even dent it with their weapons. How could this... What? This makes no sense." Nezu would just smile, sitting down in his seat, knowing that this year's class of new examinees and students was going to be a strong one, and he wished for the best for everyone entering UA, as he was going to make sure to push them as hard as he could, since they're possibly going to be the strongest ever. As he would then switch to another screen, where he would see Katsuki Bakugo easily tearing through a horde of robots using his explosions, as the teachers would be in even more shock. "So I'm assuming you know this class is going to be the strongest ever, correct? We've been seeing many prospects come in. However, these two, they possibly came from a free middle school or a public one at that. So possibly couldn't even count them, like we did with Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. So hopefully this class is as strong as it's hyped up to be with all these prospects coming in," Nezu would end up saying. The teachers were unsure of what Nezu was speaking of, but they couldn't care less. We cut back to Izuku tearing through robots using the axe called Rita, easily destroying hundreds of robots, as many of the students there would just be in shock at how cleanly Izuku was cutting through them. Once 12 o'clock would end up hitting, Izuku would just run around at insane speeds, destroying hundreds of robots cleanly, as Izuku would then power down after a minute of that, as a couple hours would end up passing. With just 10 minutes left in the test, Nezu would flick open a glass box before slamming his hand down on a big red button. As sirens would end up going off in the city, shaking would end up being heard. It was like a earthquake or something. Many of the examinees were not sure, but they didn't want to stick around to see it, running away from the opposite where they heard all the shakes and tremors that were going on. As Izuku would end up looking up over over all the skyscrapers and buildings, he would end up seeing a massive zero-pointer towering down over him, making him look like an ant, as Izuku would just be in shock at how big it was, but wouldn't really care, as he would end up hearing a scream for help. There in its arms was a brown-haired girl, the same girl that he had bumped into. Izuku would rush over towards the zero-pointer, knowing that he's got to save this life, as he would jump up, using his insane power, grabbing his axe before swinging it back behind his head and slicing it right down through the top of the zero-pointer. He had used the buildings around him to propel himself even higher, as if jumping like parkour from building to building before he was at the highest one to propel himself up, as he would end up creating a small cut right into the zero-pointer, where he would end up grabbing into that, denting it open, peeling back the metal, where he would end up grabbing his axe once again, which was stuck in the metal right next to him, as he would then slice through the wires, causing sparks to fly everywhere, as the zero-pointer would then start to malfunction. Its arms would end up flying crazy, as Izuku would grab his axe once again, jumping towards its arm before slicing its arm off, before propelling himself using momentum to grab the arm, pushing it back onto the roof of a building. As the grip would end up loosening, Izuku would see the girl start to fall. He would grab her arm before twisting motion to go out from the other way so that he wouldn't land on or under the arm that was falling down. Izuku would then, with his other arm, grab on top of another building, as his axe would end up being just falling down to the ground, creating a crater below them. Izuku would pull himself up, as he would just laugh. Well, I guess we meet again, huh? Uraraka standing there would just be in shock. Izuku had just displayed a crazy show of power, and she wasn't the only one. Many of the examinees who had seen it, along with the teachers, were in complete shock. How could someone do this? Especially a first year who probably has no experience at all using their quirk in a setting like this. Sure, Bakugo knew how to use his quirk, but that's just because he went on a rampage just exploding everything. Izuku used it with such skill and precision that it was like he's been a hero for 10 years. And this is simply because he was trained by the very best, being his father, Escanor. So Izuku would end up bringing Uraraka back down, and she would end up helping him too, making them float back down, where Izuku would end up grabbing his axe, putting it back on his back, as he would then just say, well, I guess it's it. I heard the alarm sound that this test was over while we were up on that roof. Guess I'll hopefully see you in UA, huh? Yeah, hopefully. Good luck, Izuku. And also thank you for everything. Izuku would say, oh, no problem, before walking off. When Izuku would get home, his parents would both be sitting at the table, where they would then stare right at him. So, how'd it go? Inko asked. Izuku would set down his axe before saying it went great. He had destroyed tons upon tons of robots, and he thinks he easily made it in. However, he really wasn't paying attention to many of the other students, so there possibly could be someone better than him in the class that he just wasn't paying attention of. Escanor would end up laughing, saying, please, I know I trained my son right. You're easily going to be the best in your class. Trust me. The power you have was passed down from the greatest after all, as Izuku would just laugh before going up to his room to collect all of his thoughts. He was finally going to make it into the school of his dreams, and sure enough, 2 weeks later, a big old box would end up coming in the mail. As Izuku would open this box as it was addressed to him, he would see a smaller box with a envelope on top, which said read first. Izuku would open up the envelope as a small disc would end up falling out. Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya, for making it into UA. You will be in Class 1A, and you also are the first year role model or something. You are the best first year in all of the first years, destroying many of the robots more than anyone else, with a collective 1,256 points. Great job! As Izuku would end up smiling before opening the second box, as there was his UA uniform. Welcome, class, to your first year here at UA. I would just like to start things off by congratulating you all for making it into Class 1A. However, all of your spots can be replaced by anyone in Class 1B or maybe even the general classes if they're working harder than you. So I expect all of you to be working your absolute hardest to keep your position here at the top. So don't think you can just haggle your way through training by not doing anything, because if so, you'll be moved down to Class 1B or maybe even the general classes like I just said. So let's start things off with a little training assignment, just to see who's the best at their quirk usage. However, these tests won't be measuring everything, so maybe someone near the bottom will actually be near the top in combat. So I'd like to start things off by telling you all to go find your PE locker room keys and to put your PE uniforms on, and then head out to Testing Site E. It's a dirt field located halfway around the campus. So I expect you all to find it within a couple of minutes after you've been changed. So please make your way down there. Aizawa would say as he would then walk out of the door, walking down to Testing Site E. The entire class would just be in shock at what Aizawa's speech had just told them. However, many of them would get up and rush off to the locker rooms to find their PE uniform key and their locker room keys so that they can put their PE uniforms on, as they would then do that and rush off to the testing site. Once they would arrive there, Aizawa would congratulating them all for making it in time, before he would then just smile. So, I would just like to say, whoever's in last place would be expelled from this. So I want you all to be trying your hardest. It's just another motive for you all to basically be trying even harder than what your best could be. As I saw this, he would then toss a ball to Izuku. You performed the best in the entrance exam. Please throw this ball as far as you can. It being still early in the morning, not far from sunrise, Izuku didn't have his full level of power just yet. So when he would wind back his arm in a throwing motion before launching the ball as far as he could, it didn't go as far as his very best, mostly just because of the power that he had gotten from Escanor. It just wouldn't go as far as it could have. So Izuku would end up throwing the ball just around 200 to 300 meters, as his arm was still somewhat sore from a training thing that he had done the day prior. So with that, Aizawa would then ask for the next one in line to go, which happened to be Bakugo. So he would wind back his arm before sending a massive explosion, exploding the ball forward, propelling it hundreds of thousands of kilometers or meters away, giving him around 1,200 meters between him and where the ball landed. Aizawa would say, congratulations, you are now the new leader, as he would then ask for someone to go next. Someone would yell, oh, this looks fun, as Aizawa would then smile before facepalming. Oh, if this is a joke to you, that something could be seen as fun, then why don't the last 2 spaces get expelled from this school? Huh? How about that? That sounds quite nice, doesn't it? As Aizawa would say this, the entire class would just start shaking their heads, pleading for Aizawa not to do this. However, he just wouldn't care. As the tests would then continue on, Izuku would perform quite well in most of them. As most of them were things that had to do with strength and quickness, Izuku was easily able to propel to the top of the class, as he would end up getting around 3rd or 4th in the positioning. Bakugo would end up getting 5th, as his explosions really can't help him on grip strength, or running. As running, yeah, he can propel himself forward, but it's on the ground running, so you can use something like ice to skate along it, but you have to be on the ground for this. You can't just fly through the air. That would be jumping. You could use it for the jumping one, however, not this. So Izuku getting right above Bakugo, Bakugo would be pissed off. There, once again, was Izuku smiling down at him as if he was the worst ever, as that was what Bakugo had thought. Izuku had beaten him once again, and he was now just another pebble in the path of Izuku, like he'd thought about Izuku much earlier in the series. How could someone so weak before beat him so easily now? It just couldn't comprehend in Bakugo's small brain. So Izuku would easily be able to beat Bakugo, as Bakugo would just be in complete shock and in shambles, not knowing what to do. Now, a couple weeks would pass with the class doing some more extreme training, like seeing how long they can hold their breath underwater, and just trying to make that even more, as they're trying to build up lung capacity so that they can just have more stamina. It's a hard training that they have to do, and it's a very grueling training, as there's on-site medical staff to see if anyone ends up passing out or not. So that would end up happening as another day would roll in by. They would all be excited as their training for the first few weeks had finally finished, and they were about to begin another form of training, their hero classes. This is where their combat would finally begin, and they were all super excited for something to come. So, when they were all sitting in class waiting for their teacher to arrive, Aizawa would end up walking in. Many of them would be disappointed that Aizawa was their hero teacher, but that simply wouldn't be the case. Alright, class, I would just like to tell you before your hero class ends up starting that you all need to perform quite well, as the principal, Nezu, is going to be watching them, and if he sees someone performing not to the standard of UA's first years, you will most likely be moved down in the lower level classes. So, I expect you all once again to perform your absolute best, like you should have been doing over the past couple weeks. Or else maybe, if you all decide not to, then we'll have to move the entire class, expel the entire class, or put you through hours of grueling training every single week until you get it right. As Izuku would just be sitting there, wondering how Aizawa was just so calm about explaining how he was going to expel an entire class. As Izuku had heard stories about a teacher who hasn't expelled an entire class before, and he just supposed the rumors might be true now, having met Aizawa. So Izuku would just be sitting there waiting for their hero teacher to arrive. All of a sudden, stomping would be heard from down the hall, as it sounded like someone was sprinting right towards their classroom. As finally, the door would be slammed open, and there revealed a shining, glowing figure standing in the doorway. It was All Might, as he would then smile, laughing at them. "Ha! It is I, All Might, and I am here to be your new hero teacher," All Might would say excitedly towards the class. Many of the class's jaws would drop and their eyes would turn into dinner plates, looking directly on at the number one hero. The number one hero was standing right in front of them. This was insane. They had never thought the number one hero was going to come in and even meet them. They thought he wasn't even going to be their teacher. Many of them just didn't suppose they'd ever meet someone with such a high caliber like All Might. It was surely insane. As many of the class would jump up excitedly to meet All Might, as All Might would then just say, "Settle down, class, settle down. I know it's quite exciting to meet the number one hero and all, but you all have to know I'm your hero teacher. You can't be acting like this every single day." As All Might would say this, he would then tell them what their next assignment is going to be. "So, I've come to this class today to teach you all about how to be a hero, and the first way we are going to be doing that is through a heroes vs. villains assignment. And how that is going to work is there's going to be teams of 2, a hero team and a villain team. The villain team enters into a building of my choosing, where they then hide a device made by your support course. Also, the hero team will then have to enter this building after I give you the go-ahead, saying that the villains have successfully hidden their device. So, once you head in, there's 2 ways the heroes can win. by either easily knocking out both of or incapacitating both of the villains or touching the device. Also, another thing made by the support course was your wonderful hero costumes. Please step up and take them down to the locker room and meet me in City Site A, where some of you may have even done your entrance exam, so hopefully it's a familiar place to some of you. As the entire class would rush off to put on their hero costumes, trying it on to see what they look like, before rushing off to go do their hero class with All Might, the number one hero. Once they would arrive, many of the students would just still be in complete shock. Many of them were denying it, like, I must be going crazy. The number one hero is my hero teacher, and here I am standing in front of him wearing a hero costume. It's just unreal. So All Might would then make the teams. Izuku and Bakugo would be the first hero team versus Todoroki and Momo, the first villain team, as All Might would then ask them to step up into the hero or the building where they would then hide the device. After that, All Might would ask the hero team to step in. Izuku would be trying to make a team with Bakugo, however Bakugo wouldn't be doing anything. Izuku would be stretching right outside the building before entering in, where he would see Bakugo storming off, racing through the hallways, looking for someone, as if he had a passion to absolutely destroy and smash in whose ever face was in front of him. So Izuku was able to just walk around, as it was almost completely just pitch black in the building when he first saw it. However, Izuku was able to emit light, as he was able to just walk around like a glowing flashlight, basically, as he was just walking around the room, looking for any device that he could possibly find, and maybe even villains. Every corner and door he opened, he would end up being on extreme caution, not having anyone surprise attack him. As he would end up meeting up with Bakugo, who was about to open a door, Izuku would rush up to him. Bakugo, you can't just do this alone. I've seen what Todoroki and Momo can do. This isn't a fight you can win. It's a 2-on-1. We have to work together to win this fight. Bakugo would disregard Izuku's word, completely shoving Izuku off of him, as Izuku would stumble backwards. Bakugo, you're going to die out there, as Bakugo just wouldn't care, opening up the door as they were on the top floor. Once he opened up that door, it would reveal both Todoroki and Momo standing right there, as they would jump towards Bakugo, trying to attack him. Izuku would jump forward, grabbing Bakugo by the back of his hero costume, yanking him forward before he would slam the door shut, before placing his body against the door as if to keep it completely just shut. As Izuku would yell at Bakugo for being such an imbecile, how could he possibly do something so rash and stupid? He's dumb. How could you do something like that? You almost got yourself killed if I wasn't here to save you. As Bakugo would just not care about Izuku at all, as he would jump back before putting out his hand. Move, you dumb Deku, or else I'll blast your face in like I will those villains. I'll be prepared to fire my explosions towards you. I couldn't care less if you were on my team or not. As Izuku would just say, fine, go ahead. Die, as Bakugo would open the door before rushing in, where a massive icicle would then explode right out of the door. However, it couldn't reach Izuku, melting before it even got to him, as Izuku would then create a small sun of energy fire on his finger before he would flick it down, as it would then start circling around through the ice, completely melting it, as the ice would then form a puddle on the floor, as you would see Bakugo struggling in a 2-on-1 against both Momo and Todoroki. Todoroki was staying far back, while Momo was using a bow staff to try and keep Bakugo at bay from reaching Todoroki and the device, as Todoroki would send just wave after wave of ice. However, as soon as Izuku entered the room, all of his ice would just easily melt away, not able to even reach close to Izuku and Bakugo. Izuku would help Bakugo out by knocking Momo off of Bakugo, as Bakugo would look on, yelling at Deku for how he could possibly stop him. That was his fight and his fight alone. He shouldn't have interrupted it. As Izuku would tell Bakugo he needs to stop being so stupid. We're a team. You're gonna have to work with hundreds of other heroes once you become one. If you're not gonna be able to work with a hero, you're not gonna be able to become one. As Izuku would yell this towards Bakugo, as Todoroki would continue on trying to send his ice, not wanting to use his fire because that was his father's power. And since he couldn't use his fire, or he just didn't want to, he basically became useless. The only thing he could do was one-to-one combat. So he would rush in, deeming his ice useless, rushing in towards Izuku and Bakugo, hopefully trying to help Momo out. She would give him another staff, which he wasn't trained in, but he sure heck knew how to swing the staff like a baseball bat. So he would swing the bat at the distracted Bakugo, where it would hit the back of Bakugo's head, completely knocking him out. Izuku would look down at him before thinking, that must have hurt. He probably got a concussion from that, before jumping back, dodging at one of the staffs being just swung at him. As Izuku would look on towards both of them, he would then open up his arms. Why don't you attack me? Stop standing back there. It's quite simple to see that you all are weak compared to me. As Momo would rush towards him, as Izuku would pull off the axe from his back, slashing it down, completely destroying the bow staff, completely just splitting it in half. Oh, what happened to your staff there? It's completely shattered. Weak, just like you. As Izuku would push Momo back before slicing Todoroki's staff before punching him across the face, as he would then be sent flying into Momo from the sheer power of Izuku's punch. Come on, you can't be this weak. It's quite simple to see this, that I'm going to beat you, so you can just give up now, or you'll have to face my wrath. As Izuku would say this, completely confident in his abilities. However, it was much like an act just to hopefully try to get them less confident about themselves after the easy maneuver that Izuku had done to make them look like complete ants in the way of Izuku, as Izuku was just about to steamroll through them to touch the device to give his team an easy win. However, over the intercoms, All Might would then announce, 1 minute left before the villains have gotten the victory. As Izuku would hear this, he would just decide to end this before he would lose because of time restraints. As Momo and Todoroki would jump towards Izuku, he would completely just push them back, not able to hold on Izuku, with Izuku finally touching the device, giving the heroes the victory. And the heroes have won! Please, heroes and villain teams, head back to the area where you all will be watching the next team compete. If any of you are hurt, please tell me so I can bring you all towards Recovery Girl, especially Bakugo. You must see Recovery Girl having not been woken up yet. As Izuku would grab Bakugo, putting him over his shoulder, along with Todoroki, as they would then help Bakugo towards Recovery Girl's office. Once they were where All Might was, All Might would congratulate Izuku for just being able to beat the two, as he knew both Momo and Todoroki were a force to be reckoned with, as he would just ask Izuku, what is your power? How could you keep Todoroki's ice at bay, and what's that axe thing? Izuku would just say it's quite complicated, and I really don't have the time to explain it right now. I'm still unlocking new abilities to this day, so I don't even understand the full extent this power can bring, as All Might would nod his head. Izuku would walk up to Todoroki before asking Todoroki why he wasn't using his flames. He had heard how he had an extremely powerful half-and-half quirk, and that it was completely useless to him if he didn't use the other half. Ice can only get you so far, and with fire, that with ice could be extremely deadly. As Todoroki would just say, it's my father's power. I refuse to use that damn bastard's power. As Izuku would look on confused at Todoroki. What do you mean? Can your father control your flames? Because it sure seems like he couldn't. I mean, it's your quirk after all. He doesn't have control over it. You are the one controlling your power. It's not his, it's yours. As Todoroki would nod his head, realizing how he had been completely blind to the fact that he was so arrogant to not realize his power was not his father's at all. It was his, and to think that his father had complete control over him by him using his fire, it just seemed so stupid. So Todoroki would thank Izuku, as Todoroki would then begin his training on his fire. Not that it would help against a fight against Izuku, as Izuku was pretty much immune to both of Todoroki's powers. It just shows that Todoroki would be completely useless up against someone like Izuku, as Izuku could melt Todoroki's ice, and his fire really wouldn't deal anything to Izuku at all. So Izuku would watch the rest of the battles, wondering what was next to come. All Might would then bid the class farewell, dismissing them for the rest of the day after all of the teams had finished, as Izuku would walk off, going back to start training, as he had found a beach full of garbage, and he had seen photos of it before this, and had wanted to clean it up to give people a nice place to stay and relax, as a dumping ground full of garbage really isn't that nice of a place. Hey, Izuku, if you don't mind me asking, what's your quirk? Everyone else on this bus and in our class, their quirks are quite easy to tell what they are. However, I've just not been able to guess what yours is. So, do you mind explaining it to us what it is? Izuku would look down for a moment as if he was thinking before answering. It's quite the long story, and I don't think we have time to explain it all on this bus ride. However, I'll give you a brief story of it. I got this quirk from my father, and he's been training me all my life how to use it correctly. I also have had this axe ever since I was around 12 or so, when I was strong enough to wield it, as it's insanely heavy. I'd actually predict many of you wouldn't even be able to lift it up at least a centimeter off the ground. That's how heavy it is. As some of the class would just nod their heads in agreement, while some of them would boast, saying, "Oh, please, your axe looks light as a feather. I think I could lift it with just my pinky finger," which was them just being cocky, hoping to please a girl or so on the bus. Mostly this just being Kaminari, trying to impress some of the girls sitting around him. However, his attempts would just be a failure, as they just didn't mind whatever he said at all. Once the bus would come to a complete stop, Aizawa would direct the entire class outside of the bus, where they would then start walking up these steps towards the entrance of the USJ. There they would meet the rescue hero 13 standing up at the top, who would then explain in further detail what they will be doing inside the massive dome that was right in front of them. Alright, Class 1A, today we're just going to be getting a hang of everything here at the USJ, maybe doing some rescue exercises, and getting used to all different sorts of weather patterns and different areas that you might have to deal with in your life as a hero. So, now we may enter the massive building that is known as the USJ, 13 would exclaim before entering the building by pushing open the massive doors. However, once they would push it open, there waiting for them was an entire army of Nomus. However, they didn't know what those are. This was their first time being used in the world besides the warehouse that they had been trained and stockpiled. As standing in the middle of them was a purple mist type person and a blue-haired person that seemed to have a sort of liking towards hands, having a hand on his face and then all around his upper body. "Ha, good morning, UA. I'd like to welcome and introduce you to the Nomu army, of course. These things were specially designed to take you along with All Might and all of the heroes down, so don't expect beating them anytime soon." Many of the heroes in training weren't sure what this was. Was this just a facade as villains? Many of them would look towards Aizawa and 13 for answers, however, they were just speechless. However, Aizawa would jump into action, yelling for 13 to protect the students, as he would then jump down into the massive Nomu army that was in front of him. The mindless creatures would stare on it. Aizawa, who was jumping down towards them, easily punching every single one of them that was in his path, as they had not received any orders yet. However, it seemed like his hopes to destroy the Nomu army with a couple of attacks just seemed to not be working at all. Every time he would punch a Nomu, sending them back, they would easily just get up again. With Aizawa fighting using up most of his energy, he would look on towards the laughing, smirking Shigaraki. "Oh, please, you think a simple punch can just beat a Nomu like that? That's just a sad effort you're putting on. It's merely just wasting your time and energy, delaying the inevitable of your death. So I suggest you just accept it already. These Nomus have special quirks, allowing them for the resistance against physical attacks like yours. As Izuku would see this before stepping up, with his hair covering his eyes, putting a shadow below them. Alright, you blue-haired freak, I suggest you take your army and leave. I'll give you 5 seconds before I'm forced to tear this entire army to shreds. Shigaraki would laugh like, oh please, look what your teacher's doing. He can barely even lay a scratch on them. You think a simple child would be able to beat them? You must be joking, right? As Izuku would just not care about all of Shigaraki's answers, however, Shigaraki would turn towards Kurogiri. Kurogiri, please split up that class. It'd actually be quite hard for all of these Nomus to beat them in numbers. It's the whole reason we didn't just make one Super Nomu was for the numbers thing, as we wouldn't want to waste a ton of time making it one Super Nomu that might be defeated by this class. Would rather just have an army that would possibly be spared by them. As Kurogiri would nod, opening up a portal right beneath his class, as Izuku would stare on behind him, as his class would just be consumed by the portal beneath him. Some of his classmates remained, barely being able to dodge out of the way, however, most of his class had just been separated throughout the entire building. Izuku would take that as the last straw, deeming that they weren't planning on escaping anytime soon. So Izuku would jump down, taking his axe from his back before wielding it in his hand. He would launch back down, slicing the Nomus clean in two, as all of them would continue on charging right at Izuku. The massive army and horde would just be rushing towards Izuku by command of Shigaraki. However, their attempts seemed to be just not working at all, much like Aizawa's had. Aizawa had been thrown back by a punch and was now staring on as Izuku was cleanly cutting through all of these Nomus as they weren't able to regenerate. As Shigaraki had mentioned prior, also about the resistance, that they had a minor regeneration quirk, so with that, many of them would just get cuts, but they would regenerate, causing for many scars along their body. However, this was nothing to the scale of the Nomu that we saw in canon My Hero Academia, so with Izuku cleanly slicing them in half, Shigaraki was just in shock. Not only were the Nomus not healing at all, they just completely died on impact. Izuku's cuts shouldn't have been able to get through them. They've tested it with a normal katana, and it wasn't able to even cut through the skin. So how sharp must Izuku's blade have been? And it showed how strong Izuku was wielding his axe, tearing through the Nomu army with ease. However, there was one standing in their way. It was the most powerful of all, and it was around half the strength of the Nomu that was in canon My Hero Academia. However, Izuku was only about halfway through the Nomu army when All Might decided to show his face, hopping in through the doors saying, "I am here," before looking down at a frown at all of the villains. He had not been given word that all of these villains had been attacking UA, as one of them had possibly been intercepting the connection. As one thing that Shigaraki forgot to mention was that they also had a bunch of thugs throughout the different zones. Not only was the Nomu army there, was there a bunch of thugs attacking his classmates. So with All Might there, Shigaraki would then smile. "Meet your end, All Might. This is the last thing you'll see before you die. All of your students will be rotting in a bonfire once I'm done with them." As All Might, not liking this at all, would jump towards Shigaraki and would punch Shigaraki square in the face, causing for Shigaraki's jaw to completely just crunch under how powerful All Might's punch was. Shigaraki would try to manage a scream out in pain, but wasn't able to, as his jaw was completely off, just hanging on by its hinges. As Kurogiri, noticing this, would make a warp under Shigaraki, warping them back to the hideout so that he could get further healing, leaving the Nomu army to sit there. However, before he could do anything else, Shigaraki had ordered them to kill All Might, and once that's done, to kill the rest of the brats and anyone standing in their way. So the Nomu army now having a target, they would all rush towards All Might, completely neglecting Izuku, rushing towards the shiny golden hero. All Might would easily be able to punch through them with ease, as their resistant quirk had done nothing to compensate with the sheer power of All Might's punches, easily tearing through all of the Nomus. However, after a couple of these punches, All Might would start to get tired. As smoke would start to emit off of All Might, Izuku would end up realizing that All Might wasn't going to be able to take down this horde alone. Izuku would jump in, telling All Might that he's got some help now, as he was sorry that he neglected to do anything to help fight this army. Izuku would jump towards all of them, tearing through many of them with one clean swipe of his axe, as Izuku would then jump back, putting a finger in the air, as a massive sun orb would appear out of nowhere, as many of the people around it would just think the sun had just appeared inside of the USJ. As the Nomus would end up seeing this shearing heat emitting off of the sun, Izuku would flick it down towards the Nomus, completely consuming everything beneath of it, disintegrating all of the bodies of the Nomus, as Izuku had just failed to leave a single body left. The Nomu horde was completely destroyed. Izuku, then realizing what he had done, would then say, "Dang it, why didn't I save one of their bodies? You all could have used it for research or something. That possibly would have been a smarter option," Izuku would say, face-palming before getting a pat on the back by All Might. "You did good, kid. At least you saved your classmates. You shouldn't worry about that now. You should be worrying about the safety of others and along with your class. So just you help me save them. I'll get this half and you get the other, alright?" Izuku would nod his head before jumping off at extreme speeds, basically copying All Might's super jump that he had done to get to the other side. With Izuku doing that, he would get to the other side, completely helping his class, destroying many of the thugs around them that they had not helped to destroy themselves. With Izuku going zone by zone, he would end up gathering up his classmates, as they would then meet in the last zone with All Might, as their class was then saved. As police cars would end up rolling up thanks to All Might telling Kaminari to contact the police would then rush in along with ambulances and everyone else to help the students out if they were injured. However, they would then see just a pile of villains surrounding in the other areas, as they would see the middle just look completely decimated, like a meteor had just struck the middle of the USJ. One of the police officers would walk up to All Might before asking what had happened. All Might would then say that it had been gotten attacked by villains, and they were unsure how. The police officer would write it down before telling some of his fellow officers, before asking around if anyone had gotten hurt or anything. Now, once all of that had been done, they would all be taken back to UA, where Nezu would then formally apologize for that small inconvenience about the villains, and he was thankful that none of them were hurt. As he would then announce, for the safety of their just staff and you all, that he would please like you all to keep this whole thing under wraps for now, so that your parents don't pull you out of UA. Because if they found out that you had been attacked by villains, they might get scared or shocked and pull you out of the school, and that would simply just ruin your career or your future career as a hero. Many of them would agree with this, as Nezu would then also make another announcement. "So I'll be making something for you all, as I'm building dorms, so you all can stay here on campus. You could also probably get some extra training from the staff that will also be hopefully moving in on campus here too. However, they all don't have to do this." Many of the class would nod their heads, excited that they're going to be around the rest of their class and many of their best friends for the next couple of years, while they would also be kind of sad they're probably going to be leaving their parents behind. However, Nezu would then tell them they still have to get their parents' permission, of course. A week later, Nezu would have all of their parents' permission, as all of them were now moving into the dormitories, as all of them would be sitting on the couch after moving in, wondering what they could be doing. Nezu had set aside a week after the USJ incident so they could get to know each other. He also told them that they'll have 3 weeks to get used to the dorms, while they're also updating all of the security measures. just so they needed to be training as well, because if they're not training in those 3 weeks, they'll possibly be moved down to the general studies or maybe even class 1B. So with all of them sitting there wondering what to do, Izuku would then have a bright idea. How about a bet? Because I think that'd actually be quite fun. I bet $100 that none of you can lift this axe, as Izuku would then drop it down to the ground, as many of them would see Izuku's axe sitting there, wondering how they would not be able to pick up an axe. It would just be silly. So, one by one, many of them would end up agreeing. So Izuku would then laugh. You all are about to lose so much money. I'd also even bet that All Might couldn't even lift this axe. However, someone ended up hearing that, as a window was open right behind the couch. All Might just happened to be strolling by and ended up hearing this. So, deciding it would be good fun, he would end up walking in before saying, I heard my name. Do you mind explaining what it could be? As Izuku and the class would then see that, before Izuku would then say, oh, I just simply said, I don't even think you could lift my axe up. All Might would then laugh, saying, oh, sure. I'd take a bet for that. Izuku would then laugh, knowing that he's about to win a bet against All Might, something that he could possibly brag about to his parents when he ended up getting a chance. So one by one, as his classmates failed to lift the axe, struggling at trying to lift it up, they just couldn't. When Bakugo would go up, he would scream trying to lift it up, but it simply wouldn't be the case, which would end up getting some actual just thoughts that maybe Izuku wasn't a weakling after all, having just had being able to lift up this axe so easily, and now he couldn't. It also made Bakugo quite angry. So as All Might would then step up after the entire class had done it, he would actually start to get quite nervous. So when he would power up to 100% trying to lift up the axe, he couldn't at all, as he would start to struggle before laughing. I guess I can't lift this axe after all. Why don't you mind showing us, Izuku, how easy it is? With one hand, Izuku would wrap his hand around the handle before lifting it straight up. See, it's not that hard, actually. As Izuku would then hand it over to All Might, as he would grab it with two hands before it would then fall down to the ground. I guess we're not giving you enough credit for wielding this thing. Guess it is quite heavy after all. Izuku would then laugh, just saying, yeah, I guess so. Izuku, I actually have to speak with you about something, All Might would end up saying. Okay then, Izuku would ask. Please, come with me. It shouldn't be said around all of these people. Izuku would nod his head, kind of getting stranged out by what All Might could possibly want, as Izuku would then walk off with All Might. As they would then circle around the dorms, All Might would then ask Izuku a question. Thanks to your help at the USJ, I actually was able to keep my form long enough to get out of there. Izuku would question what All Might was saying before he would then turn into just a skeleton. Izuku would be shocked. Wait, you're not the real All Might. You're an imposter. Now, All Might would then just say, no, this is actually me. Lifting up his shirt, he would then show Izuku his injury. A couple years back, I got an injury fighting All for One. And so, I've just been like this ever since. As Izuku would nod his head before asking what All Might wanted to tell him. Well, thanks to your help at the USJ, we were able to save everyone a lot faster, limiting the amount of people who got injured, and also limiting the injuries. So seeing that you really want to become a hero and save as many people as possible, I would actually like you to become my successor. Izuku would say, what? Your successor? All Might would then go into detail explaining how he can pass down his quirk, and how his quirk had been passed down to him, and for generations beyond that. Izuku, seeing an even further chance to get even more power, would accept All Might's offer. All Might would pluck a hair out of his head before giving it down to Izuku. So, Izuku, in order to gain my power, you have to eat this. As Izuku would be kind of weirded out by it, before just saying okay, swallowing it, as All Might would then say, alright, I'll see you later, Izuku, it's getting quite late. Now, the reason I'm giving Izuku one for all is because he just is quite weak in the night, and I don't want this to be exploited. Sure, there's going to be villains far stronger than Izuku is at the night, and so with one for all, Izuku's easily going to be able to counter this instead of just being a frail person like some random quirkless kid he could possibly pick up off the street. And so Izuku, if he was the number one hero, he couldn't just be swatted backwards if he was on a night mission. So that's basically why I want to give Izuku one for all, just in case he ends up getting into a ton of night stuff where he's not going to be able to basically he's not going to be able to be as strong as he could be, and especially so if he was facing off against quite strong opponents where he would end up having to use his power. However, it was the nighttime and he just couldn't. So that is basically a brief explanation of why I'm giving him one for all, but it's not going to be too important. As Izuku would end up seeing the setting sun, as the moon would then arise, Izuku would then start to fall backwards. His axe had started to topple him over, as Izuku wasn't able to lift it much longer. Izuku would then crawl back as he would look down to see his axe sitting directly on the ground, as Izuku would then sigh. He wasn't going to be able to pick it up until the morning, as he was far too weak to wield it until then. Izuku would then walk off to go to bed, wondering what the next couple of weeks had in store for him here at his new home of UA. Welcome back, class, from your break. I hope all of you are training over that time, or else I may have to be forced to move you down to one of the general courses, or maybe even Class 1B. It'd actually be quite cool to see the terror on some of your faces when you realize you have to move down to one of the lower level classes. So, anyway, you should have been training over that time. And just to let you all know, all of the Class 1B and General Course teachers have told all of their students if they perform well in the sports festival, they have the chance to move up into the Hero Course, and they may even take one of your spots. So I suggest you all try to perform as best you can. So now, let's head on to the bus and go to the locker rooms where we will then get changed into your UA uniforms, or PE uniforms rather, and then we'll head out onto the field by direction of the loudspeaker. You probably won't see me until the end of it after you all leave the bus. So I suggest this is the best information I can give you until one of you most likely ends up winning, so I don't see one of Class 1A's people end up winning. So, let's head down to the bus bay. All of the students would hurry off to the bus bay, where they would then hop onto the Class 1A bus, where it would then speed down the road off it towards the other side of campus, where the UA Sports Festival Coliseum was built. So once it would arrive, they would all head into the locker rooms, get changed before sitting down in the waiting room, waiting for something interesting to happen, so that they could be just called out. However, the doors that would end up slowly creaking open, as they would then hear over the loudspeaker that UA was now coming onto the field, or Class 1A of UA was now coming onto the field. They would all walk onto the field as all of the classes would end up just glaring right at them as the crowd would roar in excitement. This was the next generation of top hero prospects, and they couldn't wait to see their favorite heroes in the future go in action today. It was quite cool, actually. All the people inside the Coliseum, along with the people watching at home, would end up seeing at midnight the pro hero walk out from a mysterious door onto a podium. Good evening, everyone. Well, should I say good morning, actually. Today we are going to be holding the first year sports festival. So get excited. This is the next generation of heroes you'll be looking at today. Well, at least for Class 1B and Class 1A. But that doesn't mean the general course students aren't going to be fantastic to watch either, along with the support course, using some of their gadgets that they've made. So, why don't we begin with the first event here for the sports festival? Let me see, what should it be? Aha, a race sounds like it'd be a perfectly good first event. So let's get that started. The rules are you will have 30 minutes to travel around a certain area that will have 3 different obstacles you'll have to see as the race goes on. Once that 30 minutes is up, and if you don't cross the finish line, you will be eliminated, unless 42 of the contestants pass that finish line before the 30 minutes is up. If you're not inside that 42 contestants, you would end up being eliminated. So get there before your fellow peers end up beating you there. So now, a hero will now direct you on towards where the race will be held. All of the students would then be pushed into a small, narrow hallway, as many of them would be pushing and shoving to try to get to the front. All of a sudden, the door would end up opening, as many of the students would start to rush out, as the pushing and shoving would only grow and grow. Izuku, however, wouldn't be having this, deciding to push his way through everyone, easily making for everyone to just go right away to the side, not wanting to have to deal with being pushed or being thrown down to the ground, along with Izuku, who was determined to get to the front. Once Izuku has gotten to the front, he would end up launching himself forward, doing this with huge strides, easily passing anyone who had gotten their way through the hallway first and was in the first 10 of the ranks. Izuku would easily become first place, as he would end up making it towards where a zero-pointer was being, just standing there. He would end up seeing 2 more zero-pointers behind him, as Izuku would just decide to hopefully try to outrun them, deeming as it would take too much time for him to deal with them. So, with Izuku sprinting past, the zero-pointers being way too slow, couldn't grab him. So they would be forced to deal with the entire crowd that was following behind Izuku. So with them, they would cause a major distraction, slamming their feet on the ground or picking up some of the fellow students behind Izuku. Izuku, however, easily passing through the zero-pointers, he would then make it onto the second round, or the second obstacle in the race. There, he would see just a massive drop-off with small stones connected by ropes. Izuku would jump from island to island, easily getting through that one as well. However, once it came to the minefield area, it was a bit more tricky. He wasn't sure where all of the minefields were being held, but he just decided that he could possibly just walk up the side of it, and there really wasn't going to be any minefields along the side. So he would sprint through the side, only encountering one minefield, or one mine, that ended up launching him even further than where he would have been. So it actually turned out to help him. Izuku would finish first, with no one even seeing him pass the finish line, as he had done it with such speed and precision that all of them were still getting past the zero-pointer, including Bakugo and Todoroki, who had just managed to get out of the hallway, where they would then see a giant zero-pointer right in front of them, as Bakugo had gotten unlucky to where he would end up being pushed down to the ground by Izuku in Izuku's way. So with Bakugo then on the ground, he would end up having to get up and then being trampled by the horde that had followed, with Izuku making a path to get through. So with Bakugo launching himself into first, he would end up seeing no one in his path and would then be like, "Hell yeah, I'm in first! Of course I'm gonna be the best here," as Bakugo would continue on rushing past all of the events before he would make it crossing the finish line, extremely excited. There he was, as he crossed the finish line, the crowd would cheer in excitement. However, it didn't sound like the loudest cheer it possibly could be, as there he would end up seeing Izuku just sitting around, staring at everything. However, this wasn't just in the normal Coliseum, as Bakugo had been walked toward the waiting room, where he would then see Izuku staring up at a TV, looking at the race. "How the hell did you beat me, Deku?" Bakugo would yell, as Izuku would just sort of laugh. "Oh, I guess you didn't see it. I was able to get out of the hallway quite quickly, and then I just easily passed through everything with quite speed. So I just tried to outspeed everything rather than to deal with it like someone or a brute would," as Bakugo would just sit there angrily wondering how he possibly could have gotten beaten by this, but would just shrug it off, knowing that he's going to beat Izuku in the finale for sure, knowing that throughout the past history of UA Sports Festival, there was always a finale, a 1v1 event as the final event. So Bakugo set his sights high, knowing he's going to get a gold medal for this sports festival. As the entirety of the 42 contestants would end up finishing, those who didn't would end up being eliminated All of them who had passed would end up heading towards the locker room, as Midnight would end up calling them all back out after a 10-minute wait to give them some rest, as she would then explain the second event. Alright everyone, the second event will be a cavalry battle. This is how it's going to work. There's going to be 3 people on the bottom carrying someone on top who's going to have a headband with points based on what they placed. The higher the points, the more it's going to be worth for the final score. So basically, whoever has the highest score ends up winning and going on to the next round. Only 4 teams will end up going on to the next round, so I suggest you try your hardest to pass through this. Everyone would end up looking on in shock, wondering what they were going to be able to do and if they were going to be able to pass through on to the next event. As a 5-minute break period would end up starting for all of them to choose who they wanted on their team. Izuku would end up building a team of people that he had just grown friends with, being Todoroki, Uraraka, and Ida. They had all decided to team up as they had gotten quite a good score in the race, and they just thought, maybe if they all worked together using their powers, they could easily blow through the competition, passing with the highest score, and possibly even making it through the tournament and possibly having one of their team members succeed. So, once the cavalry battle would begin, Izuku, being on top, would easily just cause everyone to stay back. They had saw what he had done in the hallway and would not want to be pushed back by Izuku's sheer power. However, there were a few risk takers, and this would cause everyone else to end up charging at Izuku as well. So, with Izuku seeing that they were surrounded and everyone was charging at him, Izuku, in the palm of his hand, would then create a sun, throwing it up into the air, as the sun would then just start shining above everyone else, as the extreme heat would deter many people to stay back as far away as possible, as many of the people there would just be in shock how Izuku could just create a mini sun in his hands. While everyone was looking up at them, Izuku would yell for Todoroki to use his ice to basically just capture everyone in the iceberg. So when he would do this, everyone would get stuck in the iceberg right as Izuku would just stop the sun from existing so that the ice could not melt instantly. So with everyone then stuck in a massive glacier, they would basically just be awarded the victory, and would then just be asked for them to unfreeze them, with him shattering the ice as the match would then continue. Many of them would look on towards midnight, wondering what had happened, as they really couldn't hear anything. All they had saw in the iceberg was Todoroki walking off along with his team. Midnight would then explain to them how, since they had gotten everyone frozen, that they had just been awarded the victory and moved on to the next round. So now only 3 of you can make it onto the next round. So now the competition was even more fierce, as it started to get crazy. People were pushing each other down, launching each other across the battlefield, mostly Bakugo doing that to others, as everything was just chaos. As the 30-minute buzzer would end up timing, everyone would look on towards midnight, as they would end up hearing her say that those who had passed can now go on to the waiting room, while those who haven't could now go on into the stands to watch from above. Many people would begrudgingly end up walking off, hating that they didn't pass, and they would end up blaming Izuku's team for making it, so as they would end up lying to themselves, we were just 1 off. If that stupid Izuku kid didn't pass, we would have made it. As Izuku would end up being called out for the first match in the 1v1 tournament. Izuku was going to be going up against a kid named Shinso. Izuku wasn't sure who this kid was, but wouldn't really care, not minding what he could possibly do or what his quirk was, deciding he'll find that out on the battlefield. As the match would begin, Izuku would stare directly into the eyes of Shinso, breathing in and out, completely calming his mind. As Izuku would do this, he would then reach out onto his back before grabbing an axe and dropping it to the ground, as dust would explode up into the air, causing a distraction. As Shinso staring at the dust, waiting for Izuku to peer out of it, Izuku would rush right at Shinso, who was still staring right at the dust. With Izuku now rushing right towards Shinso, his eyes would then focus back towards the glowing figure rushing right at him. As Izuku would lift up the axe, he would then slash it down right next to where Shinso was, as a massive hole would then appear right next to him as Izuku would lift his axe up. He had completely cut through the concrete, as there Shinso was staring right at the cut. So, does that give you the confidence that you can still beat me? I guess not, as Izuku would reach out his hand towards Shinso before pushing him back with only 2 fingers. As Shinso would start to fall back, he would reach out, grabbing Izuku's arm, trying to pull himself up from where Izuku was. However, Izuku would only stand closer towards the edge, leaning over, as Shinso really wouldn't be able to push himself up anymore. Izuku was standing on his feet, as Shinso would then be falling back, losing his balance. With Izuku now off of Shinso's feet, he would fall back, falling onto the soft grass below, giving Izuku the ring-out victory. Izuku would walk away, not before giving a handout to Shinso, before congratulating on Shinso for making it this far, as he hopes to see him sometime later in his class. He had heard that Shinso had some sort of brainwashing quirk from one of his friends, and actually thought it was quite cool, and it could be very useful in hostage situations. So from that, Izuku would walk off, wondering what his next round would end up being. In the second round, Izuku would face off against Ida, as Ida, who was on his team, would then say, "Alright, Izuku, I'm sorry this team would have to break apart for this, but no matter, I'm gonna crush you," as Izuku would then merely laugh as the match would begin. Izuku would rush towards Ida, as Ida would only dodge using his speed. Izuku would grab the ground, grabbing some of the dust that was still left over from one of the other matches prior, before jumping up, throwing it into Ida's eyes. As Ida would grab his eyes, just saying how dirty of a trick that was, Izuku would just laugh. "Do you think villains won't play dirty in fights?" As Izuku would kick Ida up back behind, as Ida would then start falling down to the ground as he would try to catch himself. However, one of his hands was still on his eyes that were still very dusty. As he would land on his hand, twisting it back, he would then cry out in pain, having just broken his wrist. Izuku, then standing above him, would look over towards Midnight, saying that he doesn't think Ida can continue. However, Ida wouldn't have this be, lifting with his other hand up, with his eyes now closed. He's trying to sense where Izuku was, as Izuku would then laugh. "So, I guess you have quite the determination, Ida. Well, let's see how this goes." Izuku would then start tapping his feet everywhere he could, jumping around, tapping as fast as he could, causing Ida's head to swivel as much as he could, as Izuku would just be tapping all around Ida in a circle, causing Ida to turn in an endless circle, causing him to still get dizzy, even though his eyes were closed. As Ida would start spinning round and round, Izuku would then just decide to end it, lifting up his hand in sort of a chopping motion before slicing down on Ida, as Ida's uniform would then cut, as blood would then start coming out of this cut, with Ida then falling back, being knocked out, having just been so dizzy and a combination of his wrist and the pain, he just couldn't handle it. As Izuku would be awarded the victory, he would then move on to the semi-finals, which had him paired up against Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku had seen that Todoroki was in the finale and knew he wanted to verse him, having shown Todoroki how and why his fire wasn't his father's, and knowing that he was going to be a good fight, especially against Todoroki. However, before he could make it, he had to face off against his childhood best friend before turning his bully. Sorry about that, guys, something happened. So anyway, Izuku would be faced up against his childhood bully, Bakugo. So, as the match would begin, both of them would launch towards each other, going blow for blow. Each fist and punch would be blocked with another fist or a kick, as this would continue on before both of them would jump back, as Izuku would then grab his axe off of his back. Bakugo would put his hands to his side before slamming both of his wrists together, before sending a massive explosion barreling towards Izuku. However, Izuku was having none of this, lifting up his axe in the air, slamming it down to the ground, as the wind caused by how fast Izuku had thrown his axe up and then slashed it down caused the explosion to split up, slamming into the side walls behind them. As Izuku would rush on towards Bakugo, Bakugo, having used so much of his energy with that one attack, couldn't comprehend the speed of Izuku, as Izuku would then slam the butt end of the axe right into Bakugo, causing Bakugo to be sent flying back into the wall behind him, giving Izuku the ring-out victory. As the next match would then begin, the finale, this was for the gold medal and the loser would be awarded the silver. As Izuku would stand up on the arena, he would look on towards Todoroki before bowing, giving him just a sign that he wished for a good match, as Todoroki would do the same. After that, they would then go on about to fight, as the match would then begin. Todoroki would start off by sending an iceberg barreling towards Izuku, much like the massive attack Bakugo had used. However, right as it was about to hit Izuku, it just melted. It couldn't reach Izuku. As Izuku would continue on walking towards Todoroki, seeing that his ice wouldn't be useful against his fight, he would end up sending fire barreling towards Izuku. However, that wouldn't work, as it just couldn't affect Izuku. It seemed like heat wasn't going to work at all either. As Izuku would then take a step towards Izuku, and another one, as Todoroki would continue on sending attack for attack for attack for attack, and each time Izuku would take a step and a step, as Izuku would get closer and closer, showing that these attacks weren't going to work. So finally, Todoroki decided enough was enough, rushing towards Izuku, about to throw a punch. However, Izuku would just dodge before uppercutting Todoroki, sending him jumping backwards. Todoroki would then grab dirt beneath him, much like Izuku had, and would then try to throw it into Izuku's eyes. However, they were being shielded by Izuku's axe. Izuku would then drop the axe before punching Todoroki right in the gut, as Todoroki would look on dead into Izuku's eyes, as if trying to tell him what the hell, why won't my attacks work, as Izuku would merely just laugh. So I guess you've seen that your quirks are basically useless against me. It's just a very sad matchup, I guess. Well, it's a shame you'll have to lose like this, Todoroki. Izuku would punch Todoroki right in the face, uppercutting him before slamming him down into the ground. Todoroki would start to become dizzy from the amount of attacks that Izuku was continually landing. Everyone in the crowd was just shocked. Here were the two finalists, and it looked like one was just completely outmatched, while the other was one of the strongest people they'd ever seen. Izuku would continue on punching Todoroki and punching him, as Todoroki had finally decided and his body had just given up. With him going unconscious, Izuku was declared the victor, as a couple minutes later, a podium would end up being set up. Bakugo in third, Izuku would be in first, and there standing in the middle would end up being Todoroki. Hey Izuku, did you hear? Today we're supposed to choose our hero names. Wait, really? That's quite cool, but I really haven't been thinking about my hero name at all. I've just been focused on training mostly. All of a sudden, a teacher would end up walking in. This would, of course, be their homeroom, teacher being Shota Izawa. Hello, class. Today we are going to be choosing your hero names, like some of you may have heard. But I'm not going to be helping you and assisting you with this. We'll have one of our most enthusiastic teachers do that. You may know her as Midnight. As Midnight would then walk in before outing to the class, hello everyone, today we're going to be choosing your hero names, so let's get started. As Midnight would then pass out a bunch of whiteboards and markers to everyone, as they would then be told once they have their hero name and everyone is finished, they'll have 30 minutes to find out what their hero name is, discuss with each other and all of that, and then they will be forced to walk up to the podium and tell everyone what their hero name is. They'll be doing this in alphabetical order. So as the whiteboards were handed out, Izuku would just be thinking, I could possibly get the tag the Sun Hero, but what should my actual hero name be? Something hot or burning. That'd actually be quite cool. Lava, no. Volcano, yeah, that just doesn't sound right. Almost as quickly as it came, it went. The 30 minutes were up, and Izuku had to quickly write down a hero name, not really sure what to do, as he just couldn't think of anything. He had asked some of his peers for help, but they just were unsure, just like Izuku. So as Izuku quickly scrambled to write down a hero name, all of his classmates were forced to come up to the board one by one. As his name would end up being called, he would walk up onto the board before showing everyone his hero name. I will be known as the Sun Hero, Soup. As the class would burst into laughter, Izuku had just randomly come up with the name Soup. Where did soup come from? Like, the food? Why would... The class just couldn't comprehend why Izuku chose his name Soup. And they also couldn't understand quite a bit after this why Todoroki had just made his hero name Shoto, his first name. They just really couldn't think of anything on why these two people couldn't think of a good hero name within 30 minutes. It just didn't make sense. So with Izuku's hero name being Soup, he would end up being told that he could still change it, but it's really not suggested, as you can do whatever with your hero name, but once you become a hero and get your quirk license, you're going to want it on your license, so you really shouldn't change it afterwards. Izuku would be thinking long, hard, sitting in his dorm room, wondering, why the hell did he choose Soup? Soup? Really? Where did that come from? Izuku would ask himself. As the next day would end up following, they were all sitting in class, as Aizawa would then walk into the room. Alright, class, since you have now chosen your hero names yesterday, we can now begin some other things, such as teaching you the basics and ropes of being a hero. Sure, you've been trained to the caliber of what some basic level heroes are, but now you need to just be trained on the knowledge of one and how to escape a situation if you are gravely injured. Aizawa would go into some details before explaining how you can escape, hide in the shadows, or flank your enemy as quickly and easily knock them out. Knockout techniques to escape chokeholds or strangleholds, all different types of holds, or if you're in captivity, all different types of things on how to escape. After that, Aizawa would lead them all back to the classroom, where there would be a pile of paper sitting on each one's desk. Some people had one sheet of paper with a bunch of names written on it, while others had tons of papers like Izuku. So Izuku would scroll through the paper and would end up finding a random name. He would end up just pulling something out of his pocket. It'd be a coin. He would toss it into the air after spreading 3 sheets of paper on his desk while the others were sitting on the floor. Whichever name the coin landed on would be whichever he would end up going to. As the coin fell down, it landed perfectly on its edge, right on top of a name. Izuku would pull it up, as he would then see who his hero he was going to be internship for was. It was Mount Lady. For some odd coincidence, one of his other classmates had also chosen Mount Lady. This, of course, would end up being Mineta. So with Izuku sitting there, just wondering, oh great, my hero name's Soup, but I have to go deal with Mount Lady. It's gonna be just a weird internship full of strange experiences. As Izuku would say this, he would then be told that they are actually leaving to their internships right now, as Aizawa would push all of their classmates out of the room before telling them to go put your hero costumes into your briefcase to travel onto a bus, as your bus will be stopping all around the different stops of certain cities, and that's basically you're going to be dropped off where your internship is in their agency. So Izuku and Mineta would end up being dropped off in the dead middle of Hosu City, where Mount Lady's agency happened to be. She was the only one working for the agency, so when they walked in, it would just be her. Oh, hello. I guess you're the 2 people who've chosen to internship for me. Well, I guess you should get started with some chores, as she would hand Izuku and Mineta a mop and a broom for them to start sweeping and cleaning the office, as it had been quite the mess. Izuku would just facepalm even further. They were supposed to be getting hero experience, and here he was doing the dirty work of some random hero agency. Izuku would be forced to do all this cleaning, while Mineta was easily scraping away as quickly as he could to hope to impress Mount Lady, as it just seemed to be not working at all. Mineta would just use this as motivation to continue on working, while Izuku would have no motivation at all. It was a very dumb exercise, and Izuku just couldn't care less for this. Sure, he would still sweep, but he really wouldn't try at all. This wasn't like what he wanted to be doing out fighting. Mount Lady, however, would come up to Izuku before speaking to him. You know, if you're not going to try it this, what makes you think you're going to try it being a hero? Izuku would plainly look at Mount Lady before just speaking. You know, it really seems like you're just being lazy, sitting on that couch eating potato chips while you got 2 people to internship for you, and you're not even taking them out to experience the real world as a hero. You're just making a slave away, cooking and cleaning and all of this random stuff for you, when we should be out in the real world fighting villains. It really seems quite lazy. I'd actually try if this was my own house, but I'm doing this for no reward or nothing in favor that I could actually be gaining, like knowledge. Mount Lady would just look dead on at Izuku before just saying, "Oh, okay, I guess you have a point then. Why don't we go out and fight some villains?" As he would then be told to go put his hero costume on along with Mineta, as once they did, they would then be walked out after seeing Mount Lady have her hero costume on, who would then direct them off to where they were going to be just looking around. After that, Mount Lady would bid farewell to the receptionist at the desk, as they would then walk around just searching for a place any villains happened to be. Izuku would end up seeing a few villains within alleyways. However, Mount Lady told them she really couldn't do much at all. Her hero agency had actually told her to cut back on all the property damage, and she really didn't want to risk anything by stopping in between a very narrow alleyway. So that left Mineta and Izuku to do the work. So with her watching in supervision, Izuku would end up rushing towards the villains with his axe, pulling out his sacred treasure before slamming it up against the head of one of them, as it would then ring like a bell before falling down to the ground completely unconscious. The other villain would look on in shock before pleading for just surrender, saying that, "Please don't hit me like that. I don't think I could take something like that." As Izuku would just look over towards Mount Lady, who would then walk into the alleyway before putting handcuffs on them. Izuku would just see how Mount Lady really seemed like a lazy hero and only was in it for all the fame and glory, along with after seeing just all of the fan posts about her and everything, about how everyone adored her, Izuku just really didn't think Mount Lady was much of a hero at all, and was more of someone who just wanted to be an internet celebrity. So Izuku would continue on fighting all of these random crimes until one day Mount Lady had decided to give them temporary hero licenses, so without their permission they could go around just fighting villains. But please don't get in trouble, as my hero agency would possibly be under fire if you did something stupid. So after that, they would then split up in the deep of morning, as the day would end up passing slowly by, as nothing seemed to be happening. It was just completely bare and dry of all life and villainy. So with Izuku searching for any villainous acts, he couldn't really find anything. Mineta had been just following Izuku around, as they were told to stay in a group. As Mount Lady would end up running off to go fight other villains throughout the city, Izuku and Mineta were just searching around, not able to find anything. However, once night fell, Izuku had finally found something big. Fire started to erupt out of Hosu City. However, Izuku would already tell that it was going to be taken care of. As Izuku was heading towards it, though, to help out anyone being there, Izuku would end up stumbling upon an alleyway. where he would end up looking right into it, sensing something was wrong. There he would see two glowing red eyes staring directly at Izuku and Mineta. Izuku would grab Mineta, who was talking something about Mount Lady, grabbing a hold of his mouth, pushing him backwards, as the person who was hunched over would then stand up. I know you're there. You're not fooling anyone. Izuku would look down to see two bodies laying on the ground. One was hunched over against the wall, while the other one looked like it was paralyzed, completely motionless, right up against the ground. Izuku would look on to see a very shiny-looking armor, as he would realize that was Ida, one of his classmates. He would look on to see another hero there, though he couldn't recognize it. As the figure would then rush over towards where the alleyway would end up ending, as Izuku would jump in, his axe now in hand, and would slash down on the two blades that the wielder had was holding in his hands. Oh, so now I see who you are. You're the hero killer, Stain. Well, I guess since I've finally met you, I could finally end your career of villainy. As Stain would glare right at Izuku before laughing. Oh, sure. You think you can beat me? I haven't even heard of you. You think you could beat someone like me? I think I'm truly more powerful than you. Look at these two fake heroes. One was searching for revenge for one of his injured brothers, though I couldn't even remember him because he was forgettable. Then look at this one, only in it for the money. It's quite sad. Izuku would stare on at Stain before yelling that his ideals were corrupt. Killing is not the way to go, as it just wasn't right. Getting your ways and ideas through illegal activity just wasn't right at all. It shouldn't be done. You should try to do it through more peaceful methods and other ways. It was just simply chaotic to try and kill every corrupt hero. As there was far too many of them, you should try to become a hero and say how corrupt heroes were bad. It was very obvious, as Stain would only jump right back at Izuku, trying to stab him with one of his swords. However, with an uppercut from his axe, Stain's sword would then shatter completely just into a million pieces, as Stain would throw the hilt of the sword right at Izuku, as Izuku would slice it right in half. Izuku would jump back onto the lone street where no cars happened to be passing by because of the fire that was going on down the street a couple of miles away. Izuku would ask for Mineta to throw some of his cork things at Stain, as Mineta would then start to just pop off his cork from his hair and just chuck it all across the alleyway, completely sticking it everywhere, as Izuku would rush over towards Stain before pushing him back and slicing up with his sword, or his axe rather, as Stain would try to block it with one of his blades. However, it would shatter once again from the sheer power of Izuku's slash. Stain would then grab two knives out of his pockets before laughing. I never thought someone could break such a strong blade. But no matter. They should still be able to off you with just a singular knife. As Stain would rush towards Izuku, with Izuku jumping backwards into the alleyway, flipping over Stain, as he was now standing right in the alleyway. Mineta would continue on throwing all of his cork as his head would start to bleed. Mineta would then stop using his cork as the alleyway was then filled with his cork and his purple things that had popped off of his head. As Izuku would then laugh, I'm gonna suggest you don't come in here, or else it will be your demise. You're not gonna be able to survive something like this. As Stain would rush in towards Izuku, however, Izuku would then swing his axe like a baseball bat, hitting Stain with the blunt side of it, or the flat side of his axe, as Stain would then be sent flying towards the wall, where he would then hit some of Mineta's pop-off cork, where he would then be stuck to the wall. Izuku would ask Mineta to call the police, as he just took care of all of the heroes sitting in the alleyway. So Mineta would break out his phone before calling the police, saying that they had captured the hero killer. The police asked who it was, as Mineta would then say his hero name along with Izuku's. They were not known at all, having not stopped any crimes on their own. Remember, these are temporary hero licenses, and this is the first crime they're stopping with this hero license. So, as the police would end up rolling up, they would end up seeing both Izuku and Mineta sitting there, as the police would then get out, as many other cop cars would end up rolling up. So, you are who? Mineta would say his hero name, as Izuku would then say his. Oh, I'm the sun hero, Soup. Izuku and Mineta would both hand their temporary hero license, as the police would then look down at him. Yep, this checks out. I guess you are a hero. Although I've never heard of you. Is this your first time just stopping a villain? Oh, yeah, this is our first time stopping a villain as a pro hero. As the police would then look on in shock. Man, we've heard of so many pro heroes who stopped hundreds of crimes falling to the hero killer. It's insane how your first stop would end up being the hero killer. That's quite strange. I guess you're gonna get a lot of publicity in the news. I suggest preparing to be famous overnight. As the police would then capture Stain after with the help of Mineta and Izuku holding him down, where they would then put court-canceling handcuffs on him and tying him up just so he couldn't move any further, with Izuku saying that he was extremely acrobatic. So with them putting him into an armored cop car, they would then transfer him to a prison, as ambulances would end up going and picking up both Ida and the hero that was sitting up against the wall, transferring them off to the hospital. As Izuku would then be there, a news truck would then end up coming over, rolling in after the police would end up leaving. So, folks, today we have come here live after meeting the two heroes that had managed to stop the hero killer known as Stain. So, what are your two names? Oh, I'm the sun hero named Soup, and this is, as Mineta would then say his hero name, as they would then ask, I've actually never heard of you two heroes, so what type of crimes have you stopped before? Oh, this is actually our first crime ever stopping things. We just happened to be strolling on by this alleyway on our way to the fire over there, which there used to be one. It seems to have stopped thanks to some other pro heroes, I'm guessing. But we were just on our way and found out this hero killer was in here happening to take down some of our other fellow heroes. So we decided to stop in and give Stain a visit. And it turned out lucky because we managed to stop him and put him in jail. So hopefully his days of hero killing are over. As Izuku's saying all of this, the news reporter would then nod their head before turning back to the camera. You heard it here first, folks. This is the two pro heroes that have managed to stop the hero killer. Isn't that insane? Not even the number 2 hero, Endeavor, could even stop him. And now we have these two heroes who actually, this is their first stop fighting and defeating a villain. And they even managed to defeat the hero killer. Isn't that insane? As Izuku and Mineta would then walk off, as the reporter would then continue on reporting on what had happened, as Izuku and them would end up walking off. The next day, Izuku would be walking in to the classroom, as he would then sit down. The internships have ended, as the class would then just be sitting there. Once they would enter, they would all stare at Izuku and Mineta. How the hell did you two stop the hero killer? How did you not get scared at all? As Izuku would then just laugh. Well, me and Mineta were able to work together and were easily actually able to defeat him. Because we used his quirk to basically secure him, managing so he couldn't move off of a wall that I had managed to hit him onto. It was actually quite cool having to talk to the police and a reporter. I think I'd get used to being a hero. Can't wait to be the number 1 hero after all. Izuku would then get a flashback as he would end up being walking back into Mount Lady's hero agency to give back the temporary hero license. She would be sitting just in a couch looking directly at the door in the dark. As Izuku would flick on the light to give it to him, she would then stare right at both Izuku and Mineta. So, it appears you two managed to stop the hero killer. That's quite the feat. Now, can you tell me how the heck you managed to do that? as Izuku would then sort of laugh. As the flashback would fade out, Aizawa would end up walking into the room. Congratulations, Izuku, on doing that. It appears you've built up quite the public figure. Many people actually started calling you one of the best heroes, actually, having stopped someone that had caused fear in the hearts of many for months now. So I suggest being prepared for when you graduate this high school for soup action figures almost immediately. It's something All Might had to deal with and really wasn't prepared for, so I suggest you start preparing for crazy people like that. And also crazy people that want to try to break into your house and possibly do some random crap to you or become friends with you just because you're a pro hero. And that brings me to today's lesson. So now that all of you know how hard it is to be a pro hero, we're going to talk about people that are going to try to use you because of your title of being a pro hero. Izuku, you gotta wake up. All of a sudden, Izuku would jolt up from his limpless state as black tendrils would end up going everywhere, hanging onto trees and gripping onto them. As Izuku was falling into a portal, would then be flung right out of it, as he would then just fall right into one of the treetops surrounding him. In order to understand Izuku's situation and surroundings, we have to go back just around 1 week. Izuku and his class had been told that they were about to go on a summer training camp so that they can get more experience as their heroes. So, with them preparing to go to this training camp, Izuku was stretching out in the yard. So what do you guys think we're going to do in this training camp? Well, I think it's actually just going to be what it's implying. Training, which is gonna suck, but hopefully it'll make us great heroes along with it. Izuku would nod his head as the next day would then come. All of the students would pile into the room where Aizawa would then tell them to go down to the bus bay. We are going to get onto that bus and then travel around 2 hours up onto a mountaintop where we are going to be training. It's highly secluded, so hopefully there's not going to be any interference like what's been happening with some of the last field trips. We're hoping. As all of the students would end up going on and piling onto the bus, Izuku and his class would just be talking on the bus for the entire ride there. However, before they could reach the mountaintop, the bus would come to a screeching halt. They would then be kicked off the bus, where they would then see Aizawa along with 4 other people standing next to him. Well, class, you see the top of that mountain up there? You're gonna have to climb this mountain, and you either have to do it in 2 hours and get dinner, or if you succeed or go over that time limit, you won't get any dinner, so you'll go the night starving. So I suggest getting to that hike. It could take quite a while if you don't start early. As the class would then jolt into action, rushing up the hill. However, Izuku wouldn't be like many of them who were trying to sprint up the mountain. That simply was just a stupid idea, as they were going to waste their energy right at the start, and that would leave their entire rest of the climb just in pain because they are completely devoid of energy. So Izuku would take it slow, going with a slow medium jog where he could keep up with for a very long pace and distance. With the rest of his class falling behind, Izuku would continue on with his medium jogging pace up until he would end up reaching the top of the mountain. As Izuku would end up getting there, Aizawa would look at him and then behind him down towards the mountain and would then ask, "Izuku, where's all your classmates? I could have sworn you guys were in a group when you left." Izuku would then sort of laugh. Well, they all sort of just sprinted away up towards the mountain and lost all their energy right at the start. I pretty much just tried to keep a medium pace and to preserve my energy. It's actually, still quite tiring though. It's quite the steep mountain. Aizawa would then nod his head before sitting down and waiting. Izuku had made it up the mountain with just an hour left to spare, so he had done it in half the time that Aizawa had given them. However, it would take another 2 hours for his class to end up finishing. Well, since all of you took so long to get here, I'll let you all have a treat. You get to watch Izuku eat dinner, since he made it here 2 hours before all of you. It's quite a shame that Class 1A couldn't make it here on time. I was gonna swear I already told them you guys were one of my best classes. But now look, you wasted all your energy like complete buffoons right on the first couple meters. It's a shame you couldn't have made it here on time so you could eat dinner. I actually made it myself, and I'm quite the cook after all. Izuku could be sitting there looking down at the delicious plate of food in front of him before he would then dig in, devouring the plate right there, as the rest of his class would look on, just in shock and hunger. They were left without food since they didn't make it. However, they weren't left completely starved. Aizawa had given them one singular piece of stale bread so that they could have a little energy for the morning, as they weren't going to get breakfast until after morning's training. So they already knew this week was about to be complete hell for them. So when the next day would come, all of them who had to sleep outside, not being allowed to sleep inside, just to show that you need to have a tough heart to make it through being a hero. And if you just decided to walk off quitting, you would then have a bus take you back to the city and you would be expelled from UA right there. So you had to get through this training camp. And if you didn't, you're just going to be expelled. So there was a lot at stake for these students, and so it really was a complete nightmare for them. As the day would come, all of them would be forced to do that run down the mountain and then up it. Once they made it back, they would have to do a ton of sprints, all sorts of different things, and they would then be released into the wild. And after that, once the moon set, they could come back, having to survive with all the wilderness and beasts that the heroes had created with their quirks. So not only did they have to hunt and make food for themselves out there, they also had to defeat these monsters created by those heroes' quirks out there as well. So it was basically a survival day, as the next day would come and the training would then follow. So, as the days would end up coming to an end, Aizawa had given them the last day off of the week to just sit and relax, knowing that their muscles needed to grow and expand so that they had gotten a lot of experience from this, but they also needed to let their muscles rest, or else they could possibly never recover from such a grueling and hard training regimen. So, with that, they would all end up just getting the day to relax. And once night fell, they had all decided to play a round of hide-and-seek or two. So with them rushing off around the forest surrounding the mountaintop, they ended up smelling something and seeing something, or many of them did, that was just below the mountain, and it was spreading up towards them. It was a massive blue fire that was coming and hurtling in fast paces. It was like a tsunami of blue flames. It just kept coming and coming and coming, and they just didn't know what to do. Many of them rushed back to the top of the mountain, where Aizawa and the rest of the heroes were already there standing in shock at what was before them. Aizawa would yell for the heroes to go and get some of the students and to protect them, as he would rush off yelling for all of the students to come back to the base. However, many of them had wandered quite far, and they may have been subject to an attack. Aizawa would end up seeing portals form all around the different types and the different terrains of the mountain, as you would see tons of villains pop out of these portals. Aizawa would tell them all to load onto the bus and that they needed to go. As they would all be trying to do this, the bus would then explode. Many of the students be sent flying backwards, as Izuku, who had yet to get on the bus, would end up seeing many of his classmates just be hitting the ground and sliding down. Izuku would jump forward and would yell for them, "Why don't you just take me? Don't let these people be hurt by your foolish plans. I'll offer myself as a sacrifice. Just let them go." Aizawa would tell Izuku to stop being so rash and stupid and idiotic. However, Izuku didn't care. He wanted his friends to go on and be safe, and he was going to give himself up for it. And besides, he knew he could easily take down some small-time villains, especially if they were the ones from the USJ. How easy he took down the army of these strange Nomu monster things. He could easily take down just a band of thugs. It should be no problem for him, as he's by far one of the strongest in the UA classroom, out of all the first years and maybe even the entire school. However, another explosion would end up happening, as the building behind them would end up exploding. Izuku would be sent flying backwards, as he would end up landing down. As he was doing this, a portal would open up beneath him, and that is where we get to where I started this what if off. "Wake up, Izuku! You must wake up!" As Izuku would jolt up forward after being unconscious for just under 5 seconds, black tendril-looking things would spew out of Izuku's body, grabbing onto all of the trees nearby, propelling himself upwards, as Izuku would end up looking around, seeing for any villains while he was up in the air. Izuku's quirk had activated, being one for all. Having gotten it from All Might, he had been training with All Might and Gran Torino on his days off, and just had decided to mention it to any of his classmates, knowing that he had to keep the quirk a secret. So with One for All now activated, Izuku would end up looking around. It was nighttime and he couldn't use his sunshine abilities, as he was the weakest at night, but with the newfound power in One for All, having gotten it from All Might, he was now stronger than ever at night, so he could be confident with taking these villains down. So as Izuku would end up looking around, he would see that his class was trying to get on it to another emergency bus that had luckily pulled up right in time, having decided that Aizawa would take them all back early a couple hours before. As many of them were loading onto the bus, Izuku would yell for them that they need to depart now, and there's no time for him to make it there. Aizawa would look one time back at Izuku before giving him a nod respect before rushing off, as Izuku would then fall down through another portal and right into a chair, where quirk-canceling handcuffs would end up being placed on top of Izuku's hands, as he would then be tied down into a chair. Well, what do we have here? The UA first year's top brat. Isn't that something? You couldn't have defeated those small-time villains we sent up there, could you? Oh, I just loved seeing your teacher look back, seeing you having to sacrifice yourself, wishing it could have been him. Oh, I wish I could relive it over and over again. What do you want, Shigaraki? Izuku would say this, as Shigaraki would then just laugh. Oh, what do I want? I don't know. How about this? Your powers can be quite useful to us, so why don't you join us? It's a simple question. Hopefully I won't have to force you or do anything to you to make you join. Izuku would then sigh before saying, Alright, I guess I'll join you then. I mean, you gotta try everything at least once. Shigaraki would look on in shock at Izuku, who had just defeatedly just gave up a sign that he was going to become a villain. Shigaraki just was confused. He thought for sure he was going to have to use one of those experiments the doctor had made so that he could forget his memories or something. But here Izuku was now just accepting being a villain, and it kind of confused Shigaraki. Well then, I guess you can become a villain. I'll lead you to your room then. Don't try any funny business yet. You'll have your initiation to prove yourself tomorrow, Shigaraki would say, as Izuku would then walk over, or be led over, to a room where Shigaraki would then place Izuku down before telling him goodbye. This room looked like it was steel-padded and just had a singular bed sitting in the middle. Izuku would sit there completely confused on what to do before he just started counting, as Izuku would continue on counting how many seconds he was in that room. The next day, Shigaraki would come back to see Izuku, who was still counting. Izuku had decided not to get any sleep that night, wanting to just count. It was kind of a strange thing, but Shigaraki just assumed he was going insane or something, and that possibly could have just been the cause of why Izuku had decided to join them. So with Izuku deciding to join Shigaraki and the villains, Izuku would end up being given a villain costume, which he would just put it on. It was a simple black and white suit, so with Izuku now putting it on, he would end up walking down, where he would end up seeing a civilian sitting there struggling against all of the restraints that they had put on it. Well, since you are deciding to become a villain so eagerly, I'll decide to test you on it. Kill them. As Izuku would look down to see two people sitting in front of him, restrained, as both of them were struggling. However, I'll give you a choice. You can choose one of them. Only one. So, who will it be, Izuku? Who will you save? As Izuku would look on down in shock, as he had yet to kill anyone besides those brainless Nomus, which he had no remorse for because they were brainless. So Izuku's staring down at two living people as one of them would end up start struggling, moving his head over as if pointing towards them, as if yelling for them to save her, while the other one boy was just yelling for him to die, as Izuku was wondering what he should do, completely in shock, as Izuku could see out of a window that it was sunny. Izuku would end up grabbing an axe that was on his back still, as the axe had come to him during the night, leaving a hole in the wall which Shigaraki had seen but had decided to pay no mind since Izuku was still there. So with the axe in hand, Izuku would raise it up to the sky before slamming it down on to the person below, having barely just missed him, curving it out of the way right at the end. Izuku would then struggle to continue on before he would tell himself, this is gonna be hard, before lifting up his axe and slashing it both ways, killing one of them that was standing in front of him. However, the blast had caused the other one as well to end up being injured. Shigaraki would then smile before saying, "Well done, Izuku. I guess you passed the test. Although it took quite a while, I guess it was hard for your first kill. You are still quite new to this villainy thing after all." As Izuku would then nod his head before walking back to wherever he was supposed to be. Izuku would set his axe down that now had stained blood on it. Izuku was just sitting there with his head on his forehead wondering, what did he do? As Izuku would be doing this, a couple of months would end up passing. Izuku had done a few types of many things, but had yet to kill another person, not wanting to be falling so low. Sure, he was a villain, but that's just what his ideals were. He didn't want to kill someone at all, as he thought innocent people should still live, and it's the heroes that they're truly after. Izuku would be sitting down at a bar. Shigaraki would end up coming and sitting next to him. "Hey, Izuku, I've noticed you haven't done anything truly evil or villainy yet. Sure, you've injured a couple heroes here and there, but that's not really what I think is quite that act of villainy. So just to make sure you're an actual villain, I've actually got another thing, just to make sure you don't betray us, in case you're just some sort of double agent." As Izuku would be led down into a dark dungeon type thing, Izuku would end up seeing two people blindfolded and tied up. Izuku would walk forward before realizing who both of them were. It was his parents, as someone was then standing behind them with a neck to their throat. "So, just to make sure you don't betray us, I happen to have something built. You see this remote here? With a single press of a button, these two will be informed to off both of your parents. So please, don't try to do anything stupid while being in the League. You can always leave, but don't try to break your parents out. We'll be forced to do something to them," as Izuku was just in complete shock. As he would end up walking away, not sure what to do. There his parents were being held against their will by this villain, and now he was for sure a villain. He couldn't just betray them now, because he had their parents. He didn't want to betray them and then lose his parents. It's just something he couldn't do and couldn't live with himself if he managed to do it. So as another week would end up passing, Izuku would just decide that it's too hard being a villain. He would end up telling Shigaraki that he should let his parents go and he's not going anywhere. With Shigaraki would just laugh. "Oh, please, Izuku. We've already let them go. It was just to make sure you didn't do anything. It was a scare tactic." All of a sudden, a massive hole would end up being just punched right into the warehouse that they were in, as a shining yellow golden figure would end up being standing right in front of them. "I am here," before grabbing Shigaraki, as he would look over to see Izuku, who would then jump away, having put on a disguise every time he had went in to the bar or the warehouse, since anyone could just walk into it. He didn't want to be recognized since his face was plastered everywhere as a missing person. So with All Might standing there with Shigaraki in a chokehold, Izuku having jumped away, All Might would try to pursue him with Shigaraki, but it was no use, as another hero would end up jumping in, grabbing many of the other villains that were there as well. Izuku, who had jumped away, would end up seeing the battle unfold, as gray sort of goop would end up appear out of nowhere, sort of looking like some sort of slime monster. sort of like a sludge monster he had heard about in the news a couple of months back. As this sludge would end up expanding and growing, a tall person in a suit would end up stepping out. "Hello, All Might. We meet again." The voice was striking, and Izuku could recognize it almost immediately. He had heard the person talking over a static TV a couple times. It was no mistake. This person was the boss of the League of Villains. As All Might would end up throwing back Shigaraki to another hero to capture him, All Might would end up looking on towards All For One before yelling, "This is where it ends." All Might would rush right on towards All For One. However, All For One would easily dodge all of All Might's attacks before starting to punch and use some of his quirks as well. All Might and All For One looked almost equal, both of them having their respected injuries, with All For One having to use a breathing mask, with All Might also having that just hole-looking thing in his top of his chest. So as Izuku would end up being looking on through the top of a building, he would end up being confronted by a hero. However, Izuku would tell him that he's not doing anything and he's not a villain. He just happened to be on top of this villain top or on this rooftop doing something strange, like sort of dress up. The hero would just say okay before jumping off strangely. Izuku would facepalm, wondering if that's how easy it is to fool a hero these days, before taking off his hero outfit into the regular clothes that were on underneath of it. Jumping down, he would end up seeing All Might and All For One's fight continue on. However, he could tell All Might was struggling to continue on using the power of One For All. So Izuku would yell for All Might to jump back, as All Might, hearing Izuku's words, would then listen to it. They had practiced doing a couple moves together when they were training, so with that, All Might instantly knew what Izuku was planning on doing. A move that they had practiced where All Might would jump in first, taking many of the blows, tiring out one of the villains, before Izuku would hop in and punching it with all of his strength. All Might would realize that Izuku, who had been missing for a couple of months now, had just yelled for his name. However, on instinct, he would jump back with Izuku right there and would end up punching All For One right in the stomach, who was caught off guard. All For One would then end up laughing before jumping back. "So I see who your successor is, All Might. So it must be the young Izuku Midoriya. I happen to remember when he happened to kill someone as an initiation to join the League of Villains. Well, that's just something to fool your mind a little bit and make you start to think. It did happen, though, and he was a part of the League for quite a while. Do you remember the hero, or the villain named, let me think. Oh, the blacksmith. Yes, that's right. Do you remember that? Because of his use of random sorts of weapons. What? No, that can't be Izuku. He never falls so low. Oh, but it was your own successor, All Might. It was. All of a sudden, two Nomus would end up appearing right next to All For One's side. Oh, and Izuku. Do you happen to remember ever seeing your parents since a week ago? Izuku would look on towards All For One before shaking his head. Well, you're seeing them right now, both to my sides. Yes, that's right. Your parents just happen to become the most powerful Nomus we've ever created. Isn't that something? Your mom on my left and your father on the right. Both of them became extremely powerful after only a couple experiments on them. They both have insanely powerful quirks of my request. So why don't you go on and face them? If you want to win, you'll have to kill your parents, both of them. Could you live with yourself after doing that? I've made sure they have extreme regeneration quirks via my extreme catalog of random assortments of quirks that I've gotten. It's almost impossible to completely destroy them without killing them. So I'll let you be Izuku, and I'll let you think on your decision. As All For One would try to leave, before Izuku would jump in before All For One could even say a command to the Nomus, grabbing All For One's neck, slamming him down into the ground. How dare you! All For One would then end up laughing at Izuku's rage. Oh, please, Izuku. This is nothing. Izuku would look down at the beating sun above him as it was prime-time daylight. It was almost 12 p.m., he thought, as All For One would then end up laughing. You can't defeat me or these Nomus, Izuku. Besides, you're never gonna go full power on your own parents, could you? It's irreversible what I've done to them. So you might as well just accept it now. Before All For One could do anything, Izuku would slam a punch right down into his metal respirator, completely destroying it, as All Might would then jump in, grabbing All For One, putting cork-canceling handcuffs around him, before pushing him off to where a bunch of police officers were standing behind them. Right before All Might could even do anything else, All For One would yell a command towards the Nomus. Kill those two, and after them, do as much destruction as you possibly can. As the Nomus would then lock eyes with Izuku, they would jump straight at him, going for an attack with Izuku, who would just continue on trying to dodge, pleading with them to stop this, that they please can remember him, but they couldn't. All of Izuku's attempts to communicate with his parents were none. They weren't his parents anymore. They were just simply mindless Nomu bird monsters. Izuku would continue on pleading, but would end up deciding and knowing that it was no use. His parents were long gone, and he had to do what he just couldn't get himself to do. As Izuku would end up slowly grabbing the axe off of his back, lifting it up into the air. Izuku would slash both of them clean in two, however they would continue on regenerating and pushing Izuku back and back. Izuku would continue on jumping around in a circle, trying to limit as much destruction as he possibly could. The Nomus would continue on trying to defeat Izuku, however, they couldn't land a hand on him. Izuku, with the power of One for All and the strength he had gotten from Sunshine, it was just far too much, and the speed was too much for them to handle. As Izuku was continue on trying to just end them humanely, he couldn't get himself to end with a finishing, killing blow. As Izuku would continue on doing this, he would end up remembering the words All For One had said to him just a couple minutes prior. He's not going to be able to destroy them without killing them, which, that's quite a given, but he's not going to be able to destroy them using a sword or slash because of the regeneration thing, so he's not going to even have anything to remember them off of. So as the sun would end up beating down, Izuku would end up hearing church bells ringing from the distance. It was now 12 p.m. as Izuku would end up not church bells, my bad, guys. Bells and all sorts of clocks would end up ringing, letting everyone know it was now the middle of the day. Izuku would end up realizing this, knowing that time was now the time. Izuku would lift his hand up into the air, much similar to Goku with the Spirit Bomb, as a massive sun would end up being created right in his hand. Izuku would jump back and back as the beating sun would start melting things around them, like cars and other sorts of things. As many of the people surrounding it would end up seeing two suns, as many of them just couldn't comprehend what was happening. Izuku would lift his hand up once more, as the Nomus would end up rushing towards him. Izuku would then point his hand down to the ground, moving the new sun, before slamming it into both of his parents, completely vaporizing their Nomu bodies. As Izuku would end up seeing that there was no more of them, he would fall to his knees, completely just in shock, not knowing what he had just done. He couldn't live with himself after that. So, once Izuku got back up, he would feel a hand on his shoulder. It was of All Might's. However, he couldn't do it. He would then end up walking off, where he wouldn't be seen for the next couple of weeks, having to take some time off. However, he would then return towards UA, where he would finish off his education, becoming a hero. All around just the country and the world, people knew of Soup. The hero Soup. I can't keep a straight face saying his hero named Soup. But everyone knew the hero named Soup. After he graduated, everyone rejoiced that he was now going to become a hero. After he defeated All For One and those Nomus, possibly saving the country and world, and also with his victory over Stain the Hero Killer, everyone knew his name. So Izuku would easily become one of the most favorited heroes of all time, as he would be the number one hero. However, he still couldn't live with himself after just killing his parents. He could live, but he just couldn't remember thinking about it, ending up burying all of those memories back in his mind. And that is where this series ends. I hope you all did enjoy What If Deku Had Sunshine. It was really fun to make, and I hope you guys did enjoy listening to it or watching it. So yeah, I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.